I did go to Diana's coffin the day after I'd written it, and I read it to her in there, and I did sort of feel
For decades, Princess Diana's story has echoed through headlines, documentaries, and royal biographies, but the one voice that remained hauntingly silent was her brother's. Now, Charles Spencer has broken that silence, and what he's revealed isn't just shocking, it's transformative. With raw emotion and unfiltered honesty, he's lifting the curtain on secrets buried for years, challenging the official narrative the world thought it knew. From private family tensions to startling truths about Diana's final days, this revelation is rewriting history most unexpectedly. Stick with us as we uncover the truth behind his powerful statement. Inside Diana's funeral procession, the truth Charles Spencer tried to stop. On September 6, 1997, time itself seemed to stand still. Streets across London were overflowing with mourners, draped in silence and sorrow, while over 2.5 billion people around the world tuned in from their living rooms. It wasn't just a funeral, it was a global heartbreak. Princess Diana's final journey wasn't taken alone, but shadowed by an image the world can never forget. Two boys, her sons, walking behind her coffin with faces frozen in grief. 15-year-old William and 12-year-old Harry were forced to do what no child should: publicly carry the weight of unimaginable loss under the harsh glare of the world's cameras. As the crowd cried for the people's princess, the boys marched with a silence that spoke louder than any eulogy. What few knew then, and what only emerged years later, was the deeply disturbing truth. That walk was never truly their choice. The person who tried to stop it, their uncle, Charles Spencer, Diana's younger brother, and the man who had shared her childhood, her laughter, and her pain. When Spencer was first told by a Buckingham Palace official that the boys would take part in the procession, his reaction was immediate and absolute. Never. He was appalled. The idea that grieving children would be paraded in front of millions was, to him, cruel and unnecessary. He argued passionately, pointing out that Diana herself would never have wanted this, but his objections were coldly brushed aside. "It has been decided," came the palace's response. Still, Spencer didn't give up easily. He fought back, begged for the boys to be spared the humiliation and trauma. He couldn't understand how anyone could see this as appropriate. And then came a crushing twist. He was told that William and Harry wanted to walk. Believing this was their choice, Spencer reluctantly stepped aside. He didn't want to override their wishes. If this was their way to honor their mother, he would respect that. But years later, the truth finally surfaced. Prince Harry revealed that he and his brother never agreed to the walk. There was no discussion, no decision. As a 12-year-old, he was simply told what to do. That one lie changed everything for Spencer. He had unknowingly allowed something he would have fought tooth and nail to prevent. The day of the funeral was heavy in more ways than one. People lined the roads, clutching flowers, waving handwritten notes, and wiping away tears. It was a grief that hung in the air like fog. And then, the procession began. Charles Spencer walked beside Prince Charles, Prince Philip, and the two young princes. As cameras zoomed in on every expression, every blink, every breath, the boys kept walking, pale, solemn, and silent. To the public, they looked dignified and brave, but in Spencer's eyes they were just children, silently enduring a responsibility far beyond their years. The walk from Kensington Palace to Westminster Abbey felt endless. The sobs from the crowd were constant, yet William and Harry held themselves together. No tears, no collapse, just an eerie calm. Harry later described it as if he had shut off entirely, moving through the day like someone watching a movie of themselves. For Spencer, the pain of losing Diana was compounded by a haunting sense of failure. He couldn't protect his nephews. He had tried, but he had been lied to, and the moment was gone forever. And so, on that historic morning, while the world mourned a princess, Charles Spencer carried the additional weight of a brother's grief and a guardian's heartbreak. He would stay silent for years, Until now, Spencer is now speaking out after a long-buried truth has finally risen. Why has he chosen this moment to speak, and what is he about to expose that could shake the monarchy again? Stay right where you are. The speech that shook the throne. As mourners gathered under the hauntingly grand arches of Westminster Abbey, no one truly anticipated what was about to unfold. The air was heavy, not just with grief, but with suspense. Then Charles Spencer stepped up to the microphone, his tall frame straight, his face unreadable. For a brief moment, there was only silence. Cameras zoomed in. Millions held their breath. What would he say? Would he follow the carefully polished royal script? Would he soften his words for decorum's sake? He did neither. Instead, Spencer unleashed a tidal wave of raw truth. He didn't just speak about Diana, he spoke for her. His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with righteous fury. He called out the unseen forces that had shadowed his sister's every move, the ruthless media, the institutions that failed to shield her, and yes, even the very family whose silence had echoed the loudest. The most hunted person of the modern age, he called her. That one line, cut like a knife. Every face inside that abbey heard it. Royals, dignitaries, celebrities, political giants, but few moved. The Queen remained stoic, unmoved. Prince Charles gave no visible reaction, but outside those walls, people were weeping, nodding, and clapping through tears. And then something happened that had never occurred at a royal funeral before. Applause, spontaneous, emotional, defiant. Mourners inside the abbey began clapping, shattering the rigid etiquette of the moment. It wasn't just a eulogy, it was a rebellion wrapped in sorrow. In that short speech, Spencer did something the royal family had never dared to do publicly. He distanced Diana's legacy from the Windsors. He made it clear her sons would be protected by her family, not theirs. It was a bold challenge to royal authority, delivered at the Queen's doorstep, but reality wasn't so easily rewritten. Behind Spencer's courage lay a heartbreaking truth. Later, he would admit that his vow to protect William and Harry was impossible to keep. The boys were already deeply entrenched in royal life. Their education, security, schedules, even their emotional support systems were under the monarchy's control. He couldn't pull them out. He couldn't give them the quiet, free life Diana may have dreamed of. He had promised the world something he couldn't deliver. Years passed. Time softened nothing. Prince Harry, long after the funeral, revealed the scars he still carried from that day. He spoke of walking behind his mother's coffin, not fully understanding the spectacle the world had made of their grief. He would later say such a thing would never happen now. But back then, no one stopped it. No one protected them. And Charles Spencer? The funeral still haunts him. He remains steadfast in his belief that the boys should have been spared that public march, that spectacle. He has never backed away from that position. His words at the funeral were just the beginning of a family at odds, of a monarchy quietly shaken, and of a reckoning that would unfold slowly, year after year. For William and Harry, that day was not only a public goodbye, it was a moment that split their world in two. One path led deeper into the palace. The other led eventually to exile. But if you thought that was shocking, wait until you hear what happened next. The reaction of the royal family will leave you completely speechless. The quiet palace, how the royals reacted as the world fell apart. When the world first heard the devastating news, Diana, Princess of Wales, has died, it felt like time had shattered. Radio stations halted their broadcasts, televisions cut into regular programming, and the British public poured into the streets as if drawn by a magnetic wave of sorrow. Strangers clung to each other. Grown men wept openly. Outside Kensington Palace, and even more so outside Buckingham Palace, the pavements vanished beneath mountains of flowers, handwritten letters, and flickering candles. This wasn't just mourning, it was collective heartbreak. And yet, while the people cried, something odd, almost unsettling, was happening behind palace walls. The royal family remained completely silent. Hours passed, then days. No statement, no public appearance, no shared moment of grief. While the world reeled, the family at the heart of this tragedy remained cloaked in stillness, tucked away in Balmoral Castle, hundreds of miles from the mourning crowds. At first, some believed this was a time of private grieving, that perhaps, in their way, they were processing the shock. But soon, the silence felt less like grief and more like indifference. Why hadn't the Queen addressed the nation? Why wasn't the Union Jack flying at half-mast over Buckingham Palace? And why, above all, weren't Prince Charles and his sons in London sharing this sorrow with the people? Public anger began to grow like wildfire. Headlines that once praised the monarchy now turned against it. Major newspapers demanded action, with front pages crying out, "Your people are mourning. Where are you?" The monarchy, for perhaps the first time in recent memory, looked completely disconnected from the very people they were meant to represent. Meanwhile, behind the high stone walls of Balmoral, two boys were living through the worst moment of their lives. William and Harry, just 15 and 12, were asleep when Diana died. It was their father, Prince Charles, who had the awful task of waking them. He had to sit them down and explain that their mother had died in a violent car crash in Paris. She wasn't injured. She wasn't in a hospital. She was gone, and she was never coming back. Harry would later remember asking the same question over and over again, hoping the answer might change. Is she gone? The last time the boys had spoken to their mother was just a day earlier. It was a quick phone call, a talk-later sort of conversation. Short, casual, the way you'd speak to someone who would always be there. But now, those few words haunted them. What if they had said more? What if they'd known it was the final goodbye? Inside Balmoral, there was no flood of emotion. The royal household is not known for displays of affection. The boys were comforted in the only way the Windsors knew, through routine, control, and quiet. Years later, Harry would admit he felt utterly confused. The world outside was crying, but inside the palace, nothing. No open grieving, no deep conversations, just an eerie silence. Outside, the public pressure continued to mount. The royal family's silence had turned from troubling to scandalous. The Queen, famously reserved, had no choice but to respond. On September 5th, 5 full days after Diana's death, she finally made a televised address to the nation. Sitting in front of cameras, she spoke of Diana as a remarkable human being. "I want to pay tribute to Diana myself," the Queen said. "She was an exceptional and gifted human being." It was a speech meant to heal, to bridge the growing gap between the people and the monarchy. But for many, it came too late. The damage had already been done. The moment that required warmth and connection had passed, and the response had been silence. This tragedy had peeled back the layers of the royal institution. Diana was seen as real, open, flawed, yet human. The royals, remote, controlled, almost untouchable. Her death revealed just how wide that emotional divide had become. But if that left you stunned, what unfolded next between Spencer and the royal family might just send shivers down your spine. Exposing the crown, Charles Spencer's fierce critique of the royal family. Charles Spencer never backed down. From the moment Diana was pulled into royal life, Spencer had watched the slow unraveling of her spirit, and he made sure the world knew it wasn't just a private pain. It was a public failure, one that belonged, in his view, to the very system meant to protect her. Diana entered the royal spotlight as a bright, wide-eyed 19-year-old, full of hope and warmth. But instead of being embraced, she was met with cold traditions and rigid expectations. She was told to smile, to wave, to be the perfect princess. But inside, she was breaking, and Spencer saw it all, not just as her brother, but as someone watching the monarchy crush the life out of someone it should have cherished. Even after Diana's tragic death, Spencer didn't stay silent. He spoke out, again and again, in interviews, speeches, and documentaries. His words didn't soften with time. His anger only grew louder. He believed the royal family had turned their backs on her, first emotionally, then physically. She was still the mother of a future king, still one of the most famous women alive, but when she needed help the most, they left her exposed. To Spencer, the facts were unforgivable. The press stalked her day and night. The palace knew, and they did nothing. No extra protection, no sincere intervention. They simply watched as she was hunted across continents by flashing cameras. Until, on August 31st, 1997, the chase finally ended, in a tunnel in Paris. But it wasn't just Diana's death that lit the fire in Spencer's soul. It was what it revealed. The entire royal machine, he believed, had used her for image and popularity, and then discarded her when she no longer fit the narrative. To him, it was nothing short of inhumane. Then came the moment the world remembers, his eulogy. Standing before a nation in mourning, Spencer delivered what many believe was the most brutal truth ever spoken at a royal funeral. He didn't just comfort, he confronted. He condemned the paparazzi, yes, but he also delivered a powerful blow to the monarchy itself. When he said Diana needed no royal title to work her magic, he was declaring that her power had never come from the crown. It came from who she was. The monarchy had borrowed her shine, but never truly accepted her. And then came the promise that shook the world. With the world watching, Spencer vowed that her sons, William and Harry, would not be left in the hands of the same people who failed their mother. He declared that Diana's blood family would protect them, guide them, and love them, imaginatively and compassionately. She had always wanted. The message was clear: we don't trust you with them, and neither should the world. Inside Westminster Abbey, the royals sat frozen. The Queen didn't flinch, Charles didn't blink. But outside, the response was thunderous. Applause rang out across London. People cheered, cried, and embraced. Spencer had said what millions felt but didn't dare speak. Finally, someone had called out the crown, not behind closed doors, but before the eyes of the world. And Spencer didn't stop there. In later years, he continued to speak out, calling the royal family's treatment of Diana cold, unfeeling, and cruel. He described the nights she cried to him, begging for someone to hear her pain. Yet no one came. Nothing changed. Spencer's account remains one of the most unfiltered, heartfelt condemnations of the royal institution. He never aimed to smooth things over. He didn't seek reconciliation. For him, Diana's story wasn't just about a fallen princess. It was about a woman failed by power, trapped in silence, and ultimately left to fend for herself. But that silence wouldn't last forever, because Diana's pain didn't end with her. It lived on in her sons, especially Harry, who later said he felt the same lack of protection his mother did. Now, get ready to see how, years later, Harry took that fight to the next level by stepping away from the royal family entirely. The escape. Harry's stand against the palace that failed Diana. Charles Spencer never settled for silence. While many blamed the institution for Diana's pain, Spencer went further. He blamed individuals. He believed there were people within the palace walls who wanted Diana weakened, sidelined, and ultimately erased. Her immense popularity had, in their eyes, become a threat. She was magnetic, emotional, and beloved, everything the palace wasn't prepared for. And instead of celebrating her, they tried to contain her. In one chilling interview, Spencer described Diana as the most hunted person of the modern age. He wasn't speaking in metaphors. He meant it. The press chased her everywhere. The palace left her to face it all by herself. No protection, no support, just flashing cameras and endless headlines. Even in death, Spencer believed the royal family continued to fail her. He was especially furious over how her funeral was handled. One decision in particular haunted him, forcing young Prince William and Prince Harry, then just 15 and 12, to walk behind their mother's coffin through the streets of London, watched by millions across the globe. Spencer fought hard against it. He met with palace officials, pleaded that the boys were too young, too broken, but no one listened. Years later, his warnings were tragically confirmed. Harry publicly admitted the experience had scarred him for life. William echoed that sentiment, saying no child should have to endure something so emotionally brutal. Spencer had been right, but his voice had been drowned out by royal protocol. As the years passed, Spencer's criticism didn't fade. In fact, it sharpened. In speech after speech, and in multiple interviews, he continued to speak out, making sure no one forgot how Diana was abandoned in her most desperate moments. But while Spencer's weapon was his voice, Diana's youngest son would choose a different path. Harry chose action. From a young age, Harry reminded people of Diana. He had her fire, her warmth, her rebellious heart, and her unease within royal life. He never forgot how his mother was treated, the relentless press, the cold indifference of the institution, and most painfully, the night it all ended in a Paris tunnel, the media chasing her to her death. That trauma never left him. In interviews years later, Harry admitted that even now, the sound of clicking cameras brought him right back to 1997. But it wasn't just about his own memories anymore. He saw the same nightmare unfolding all over again, this time with Meghan. The headlines turned cruel. The support from within the palace faded, and Meghan, just like Diana, began to break under the weight of it all. Harry saw history repeating itself. But unlike his mother, he had one option she never truly had. He could walk away. And so, in 2020, Harry and Meghan made one of the most shocking decisions in modern royal history. They stepped back from royal duties, moved to the United States, and cut formal ties with the institution that had shaped and hurt them both. It wasn't a rebellion. It was self-preservation. Harry wasn't trying to burn down the royal legacy. He was trying to protect what mattered most, his family. In doing so, Harry walked a path Diana had started years earlier. Before her death, she had pulled away from the monarchy, sought independence, and began telling her own story. She was on the verge of becoming something entirely new, something royal, but free. Harry finished what she started, and standing quietly in the background was Charles Spencer. He didn't give interviews about Harry's decision. He didn't need to. His long-standing war against the royal system made his support obvious. After all, Harry had rejected the very thing Spencer had spent decades challenging. Now let's explore, how did a woman trapped by royalty become the most adored figure of her time? Stay with us. The truth might just break your heart. Why the world still loves Princess Diana, a legacy of humanity over royalty. Princess Diana's story is not just royal history. It's a deeply emotional connection that millions still feel today. What made her unforgettable wasn't her title, but the way she used it. Instead of keeping a royal distance, Diana chose closeness. She walked among people, held their hands, and listened without judgment. Whether it was comforting AIDS patients at a time when fear and stigma were rampant or stepping into an active minefield in Angola to push for a global ban on landmines, Diana acted with courage that was rare and raw. But what truly made people fall in love with her was her honesty. She didn't pretend to be perfect. In a world that expected royals to wear masks of perfection, Diana revealed her struggles with bulimia and emotional pain during her marriage. This vulnerability made her more than a princess. It made her human. People saw their own fears, insecurities, and hopes reflected in her. Her fashion sense grabbed headlines, but it was her heart that made history. Diana brought warmth and personality into a cold, rigid monarchy. She paved the way for a new kind of royalty, one that leads with kindness, openness, and emotional truth. Her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, continue her work, championing mental health and humanitarian causes she once stood for. People loved Diana most because she didn't just represent the people, she was one of them. Her legacy lives on not because she was royal, but because she was real. So do you think Charles Spencer could have done more to support Harry and William? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.